This week on The Kid in the Wheelchair, I am back with Chris Babb, LMSW, the school social worker who saved my life. We're back with part 2. We're going to continue this great conversation. Stick around. It's going to be a great show. You might know me as the Kid in the Wheelchair because I was diagnosed with cerebral palsy at 18 months old. I'm going to share with you my experience in the healthcare system, growing up different, and what it's like living life on wheels. Alongside some of the people that have had an impact on my world, as well as the world of disability, I'm having those difficult and sometimes ridiculous conversations that reframe the way we think about disability. We've talked so much about our work together. So, what are some of your fondest memories of our time working together? I mean, it can be work-related, whatever, you know?
There's a few things. I mean, it's really confining to just relegate it to a couple of things. But if I were to say what are some highlight moments in terms of getting away from, like, if I had to honestly say what do I have fondest memories of, you allowing me to play the part. Right? Like, that's why I always said, like, people aren't really allowed to thank me. And I still emphasize that with young people, that you can't thank me unless you're willing to thank yourself first, because you allowed me to continue to be that safe space for you. Right? Like, you created that. I was just a byproduct of the moment that took the calculated risk, and like, it worked. But you were the initiator. So, like, the fondest memory is that you allowed me to play the part, and you did the work. Like, that's the greatest of it all. But if there's some some spotlight moments, number one, I will say just all the work we did in the club, right? Away from the work of your personal growth.
Yeah, when I was president / vice president.
You wore many hats, because you had to.
Yeah.
And again, I didn't ask you. You just kind of, like, I think that was just also your way of not having something that became meaningful for you. The club became meaningful, right? We were making a difference in the high school, to not have that then fall apart, right? And again, 2012 class, still my favorite class.
All right. Shout out to 2012.
Yep. And so, there's that. So, I'm a baseball fan, as we know.
Unfortunately.
I'm a Yankee fan.
Unfortunately, it's a Yankee fan.
You're a Mets fan.
Yes.
We made a wager one year.
Yes, we did.
Matter of fact, and this was your sophomore year.
Yes, it was.
That we made this wager. And the reason I know that is because Dr. Carroll was house principal, and he took the picture that ended up on the website. We made a wager about who would win the Subway Series, and winner would get the loser to then dress up in the winning team's apparel. Never one to shy away from being bold and braggadocious and bordering on cocky. I took that bet, thinking there was no chance in hell that I would ever have to wear anything that was orange and blue. And freaking Mets won. You pimped me out. Like, I looked like I was like some 1980s Times Square.
You look good, man. You look the best I've ever seen you.
I look like a 1982 Times Square prostitute. Like, you had me so decked out. I danced the fine line between confident and cocky. I took that as a cocky, like, sportsman bet. And, I had to pay the piper. And I'm not one to ever welch on my bets. So, yes, I came into work, and much to my chagrin, and I was thinking I'd have to wear a hat, maybe a shirt. Dude, first of all, the hat was one thing.
Yeah, the hat that lit up.
But the fact that the NY not only lit up, but blinked like I was a goddamn freaking, like a satellite or something.
That was awesome, man.
Then you had do you remember the pendant, the Mets
medallion,
pendant medallion that had I looked like I was part of the Mets gang.
You look like Flavor Flav or something.
And then the only saving grace. All right. Then there was the lanyard, right? The Mets lanyard.
Lanyard.
You made me switch my work keys so that the Mets lanyard was hanging out of my pocket.
Yep.
The only saving grace to any of this is that at least you had the baseball acumen to understand if he's going to wear a Mets jersey, let it be at least somehow 6 degrees of separation connected to the Yankees' history.
Yeah. So I gave you an Ike Davis jersey, right?
Yeah, and his dad, Ron Davis, was a relief pitcher with the Yankees in the late 70s, early 80s. I think the Yankees got him in a trade with the Twins, I want to say, but I could be wrong. But he was like a setup relief pitcher for Goose Gossage. And then his kid was, Ike Davis. So
yeah. So after that day went by, we took the picture of you,
Dr.
all
Carroll
decked
took
out
it.
and all this.
Yep.
And they put it up on the district website.
Thank God it's gone. Although it means it's out there somewhere. But
We gotta find that somewhere.
well, Dr. Carroll is retiring next year, so and I do hope that he has it somewhere.
If we can find it, and you find it before this episode goes up, I'll put it up in post.
And your light's on, right? You're
Yeah,
good.
it's the lights on. I'm watching it now.
So that was certainly a highlight moment. You're right. The club stuff, you kind of doing whatever it took, not because you were asked to, you just saw a need and and you said, I can fill that need for this week or for this particular activity. Little did I know though, that you had such a capacity to see a need and to go after it. Because that's probably you and I have tongue in cheek this next thing, pretty regularly over the course of our relationship history. But back, I want to say 2011, Arlington hired a superintendent who was hired from the outskirts of Buffalo, and Mr. Hicks came in. And he was only a superintendent in Arlington for maybe a year. And part of his budget proposal was that he was going to take social workers out of the high school, not do away with them in the district, but he felt like there was enough support at the high school with guidance staff and school psychologists that social workers were not needed.
Yeah, it's such a wild way of thinking.
And, you took that kind of as a personal offense.
Oh, yeah.
And I think initially, right, you made it about me because you weren't about to lose me, but I didn't want it to be about me. We had those conversations.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
Because you came in and, you had written kind of a letter, you had developed a petition,
Yep.
And you wanted to protest, you wanted to bring to light public awareness.
Because it wasn't just you that was
Right.
going to lose your job. It was all the social workers.
Well, and it wasn't even necessarily that, and at the time, right, remember, there were only 2 social workers at the high school at the time.
Mm-hmm.
So we were led to believe that we weren't going to lose our jobs. We were just going to be moved to other buildings in the district. But you didn't like the idea of taking away that kind of support, right? And so I said, this can't be about me.
Yeah.
It has to be about the role and the purpose that role serves students.
Yep.
And that's what you brought to light. And, I'm glad that we had those conversations because the district from that moment, right?
Yeah.
And for you all need to understand, a 16-year-old kid who we've already said has no patience was about to dismantle bureaucracy within the district in such a profound way. Like, it's still, like, all these years later, I don't know how you got one of the head psychiatrists at St. Francis Hospital at their clinic to write a certified letter to the Board of Ed addressing the importance of social work therapy, clinical support in a school setting. I don't know how you got a letter from the Dutchess County, the head of I think he was the commissioner of the Dutchess County Department of Mental Hygiene, certified letter.
Yep.
1,400 signatures.
Yep.
Some of which, by the way, Sin Chin, if you are out there, you still have detentions you need to serve for skipping class and infiltrating classrooms to get signatures. Like some of those things are so mind-boggling. And this is true grassroots, right? You then organized also other students who you knew were talking to me or had spoken to Miss Evans maybe. And you staggered who came to what board meetings. And at a board meeting, you read your personal letter during which you, and I only know this because I refused to go to him because I didn't want to.
Yeah.
Right. I needed to have distance from that.
Separation. Yeah. Yeah.
But you read a personal disclosure letter during which you actually took all of the work that we had been doing up to that point, and you encapsulated it into like a page in which you talked about living with bullying, in which you talked about living with your disability, about your suicidality. And you had 9 board members crying by the time you were done with that letter.
Yep. I'll never forget.
And to Arlington Central School District's credit, not only did, like, and you talk about how far, like, we have come, right, as a phrase. Not only did they take that out of the budget, not only did they remove that line item and they kept social workers at the high school, since then, okay, instead of Miss Evans and I being shared amongst 4 grades, now the high school has a social worker for every house, for every grade.
That's awesome.
And we've hired more within the district as well.
That's awesome.
And so, you know, and I would even be willing to argue, just because the paradigm shift with society has become so different. We still don't have enough support because I think the need is that great. But, you know, like, that's probably such a fond moment, you know, and you know, we've talked, right? You did that so that you could save my job, so that you could then go to Albany, get your degree using only a snippet of the knowledge that I gave you to get your degree so that you can then come take my job.
Hey, listen, you know,
which in 4 years could be yours because that's when I retire.
We'll see.
But no, I like really, really cool. Like, you know, that happened.
It was such an experience because I remember during that whole time, there were so many people that were like accusing me of, oh yeah, he's, you know, in cahoots with the superintendent and all. They were saying wild stuff, and I'm like, wait, that makes no sense. I'm going against the superintendent right now.
Yep.
And then
he left after that 1 year.
Yeah. And then
he met John Gilroy, and John Gilroy ran him out of town.
I just remember the jokes among like teachers and stuff after that happened. They're like, yeah, hey, can you get me a better classroom or whatever it is? You know what I mean? That was the running joke.
Well,
with everybody.
Mr. Hawkins, well, we also know because you took Gold's Gym to task, right? That's a story that I'm aware of.
Yeah.
Because their bathrooms were not as spaciously needed to be handicap accessible. Mr. Hawkins jokingly wanted you to take the school district to task because remember the South office when it's new design?
Her office was like a closet.
So she was like, well, do something. Make him expand it.
I remember that. And then you had the running joke after that happened was like they used to call me he used to call me the good father. So you had a picture of Marlon Brando on your door after that.
Yep.
For a while. That was funny.
You made the district an offer they couldn't refuse.
Yeah. I mean, like you said, shout out to Sin Chin. I mean, he helped a lot. I mean, and there was points where I almost messed that all up because I remember there was one day I accidentally, because I would come to school with the packet in a manila
envelope
and just like carry it with me all day.
Yep.
And one day I was going to like a regular session with you and I accidentally left it in your office. Next thing you know, I get a phone call, over the classroom and it's you and you're like, you need to come get this. And I go get it and you're like, are you crazy? Are you trying to like make it look like,
Well, because
no, you're right. You were right.
I needed to not have anybody.
Yeah, absolutely.
Even misconstrue, right, which would have been so easy.
Yeah.
That I put you up to that.
Yeah, absolutely. No, that was all me. I told you when you first told me, I said, no. I'm gonna get you your job back. Like I'm gonna get you. You guys need to be here. It's not just you. Like you said, it was more like I'm thinking about the future.
You were thinking about all students.
The kids need this. Yeah. So moving away from that, I know you said you have 4 more years. So, you've been at this for a while. So how has your approach, like in the clinical aspect, changed over the years with, different generations of students that you work with?
I will say unequivocally, like my own personal practice, right, in the realm of mindfulness has been probably one of the biggest things because it has impacted my relationship with myself and then by proxy, the world of which, we share, right? People in my life, whether it's personal or professional. So for me to have like greater awareness as to who I am and what I'm feeling in any given moment and knowing how that can help me navigate things has been huge. But then I've also then incorporated that in the work I do with young people, is teaching awareness. And I would say, though, the issues, and I say that with a little inflection, right? Because it's issues. The things that we all struggle with, by and large, the themes are the same. What's promoting those themes of anxiety and depression and, angst? What's promoting those feelings might be a little different than it was 15, 20 years ago or 26 years ago when I started my career.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, very different.
But the themes are pretty much the same, right? Like anxiety is still anxiety. Self-injury is still self-injury. Depression, sadness, suicidality, those are still the same. But my role with mindfulness, I think, also has allowed me to become less concerned with the story, the narrative.
So you mentioned mindfulness. Can you expand on that just for people that are watching, listening?
Yeah.
Might not know.
Yeah. I mean, listen, mindfulness it's such a, in many ways, a cliche term, right? Like it really kind of became magnified in and coming out of the COVID pandemic. You really heard it sweeping, through schools and through enterprises. But mindfulness has really been around for 45 years. in terms of Western world mindfulness. Mindfulness is really, in many, many ways, it's about just trying to understand now without judgment, right? It's experiencing the world typically through our five senses without judgment. And it's doing it with a real purposeful intent.
It's the ultimate of being present with your life.
But with its purpose, it's purposeful in that way, right? Like to purposefully pay attention, right? It's one thing to say, like if you're in class, right? And I'll use that because that's kind of the nexus of our relationship was, you know, you were a student and I was a staff person in that school. You could be in class and you can be paying attention to a lecture, say, or a topic in U.S. history, for instance. But to also pay attention on purpose, like where are my, like without noticing with my eyes, right? Like if I were just to say to you right now, notice your feet. Without looking, just notice your feet. Maybe pressure or sensation. Can you feel tingling at the tips of your toes? Can you feel warmth or coolness? Right? Like those are human elements that...
It's almost like a, what do they call that? Like a body scan?
I mean, that's a piece of it. That's one aspect of mindfulness, right? Is using the body scan. But it's about also noticing your breath. It's about maybe noticing the soundscape, right? Without searching for sound, just notice what you hear, right? So what do you see without looking? What do you notice without looking at, right? So taking that notion, right? And it started, John Kabat-Zinn, just this is my plug for mindfulness in schools. John Kabat-Zinn in the late 70s was working with patients that were afflicted with chronic pain. And he really wanted to see if there were other things that could lend a hand, that could pay dividend to pain management without medicine, right? And he had been studied and well-versed within, meditation, and, Taoist and Buddhist kind of roots. But he took it in a way where without it being affiliated with a philosophy or a religion, but more in a what I call a neurobiological perspective, right? The way that our body's neurology and physical components come together to pay attention to things. So like instead of focusing on the pain in my knee, what if I focus on the sensations of like the coolness in my feet? Or what if I focus on the rise and fall of my chest as I breathe and take that away from the attention that I was giving the pain in my knee? And then he took this, developed it as a curriculum, and he then repeated it. And so, in 1979 with UMass Medical School, he started that. And then by the time the 80s started rolling along, you started seeing mindfulness come up in mental health. And then by the early 90s, Marsha Linehan developed DBT and working with suicidal patients. And DBT is 4 different models, but the one model that is the root of the other 3 models is mindfulness. And then people who were then experiencing, whether it was because they were taking a course or they were studying it, they began to then crop up in schools. And so mindfulness in education in the Western world has been around for 25 years now.
You created a whole mindfulness room.
Jen Arco, now Jen Green, who was a social worker that came to Arlington. She was a grad student who I actually, I had the honor of being her supervisor when she was in grad school. She was very research-based. She was much further along and further intimate in terms of personal use of mindfulness. And so it was such a meeting of the minds. And then she and I, we ran a pilot program, and we took the numbers from that pilot program that we ran for 5 weeks. and we presented it to the district, and the district gave us a green light without any inhibition to design this space as we saw
Yeah,
fit.
I've been there. It's a cool spot.
Imagine if like that was in existence when you were there,
I know.
But yeah, so we've been our mindfulness room's been up and running before the pandemic came along.
Yeah. Yeah, it's great. So you kind of touched on it a little bit earlier, but I think social media has played a huge role in the mental health crisis that we see right now.
Yeah.
Among young people.
Mm-hmm.
I mean,
And adults.
Yeah, I even see, going back to when I was going through everything that I was going through. At that time, Facebook was the big thing, right? And
Facebook was just coming on board too, because prior to that, there was MySpace and Springform.
Yep. Oh my God, Springform. I remember that.
And Tumblr.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
Those were like the three early players.
Yeah. So, and at that point, I didn't have a smartphone. I didn't have a smartphone at all in high school until I graduated. Mm-hmm. And thankfully I didn't, because when I logged into my Facebook after like a year or so of not using it from the family computer, I noticed that those individuals that were bullying me had also been writing and posting things on Facebook about me that entire year and change that all of that was happening. Mm-hmm. It's all gone now, but thankfully I was seeing that content now from a space of having worked through all of those emotions and all of that, the emotional processing and the growth that I had experienced. So I was able to be like, oh, okay, that happened. Move on. Their words don't hold any value,
Right.
basically. But I imagine, like, I can't imagine if something like that, and I had a phone in my pocket, and it was just constantly going off, and every time it went off, you just see that another person said something, another person wrote this, said this, blah blah blah. It's no wonder.
So
I was wondering, like, what role do you think social media has played?
it's played a huge role in that. And again, like, let's be really, really specific about the fact that Governor Patterson, right? He was then governor of New York State.
Yes.
In 2009, he signed a piece of legislation that became law. I think it was 2010, which was the Dignity Act, right? Known as DASA, right?
Yep.
Dignity for All Students Act. And it's known as the anti-bullying legislation, but that became an entity out of, there was a flurry of bully-related suicides in the tri-state area, 2008, 2009, 2010. And the proverbial straw, right, in terms of media attention was a young man, I want to say his name was Tyler. Went to Rutgers University.
I can't remember his last name, but I know who you're talking about.
And Tyler was and forgive me if that's the wrong name, but
It is Tyler. I just can't remember his last name.
But he was a young gay man, and he came back to his dorm room with somebody, and his roommate hid in the closet and filmed him in, whether it was a kiss, whatever, and then put it on the internet. And I don't remember if it was on a social media platform or if it, but Tyler, he then was outed, right? He had no say in how that was going to be. And so there was no safety to that, right? And so he then walks across campus and gets the finger pointing, right?
Yeah.
and the mocking and the name calling, and he jumped off the George Washington Bridge. So like it was already doing it then. And so like Miss Evans and I used to go into health classes and we would talk about the Dignity Act, right? Because schools were then,
I remember that.
Schools were then, told you have to have this embedded in your code of conduct. And so we talked about it. And I think the one thing that stands out, and you allude to this, you didn't have a smartphone. Well, I'm old as fuck. Okay. And like, I'm 54, so
Yeah.
I grew up when there weren't cell phones. I grew up when there wasn't internet. So, and I grew up, okay, I was the victim of bullying,
But back then it was like bullying wasn't a thing. Kind of.
Well, no, it was, but part of the mindset was like, suck it up, buttercup.
Yeah.
It was like, hey, listen, like that's just kids being kids. And there's some merit to that in that, you had to develop some resilience. The game changer that comes with this and social media, though, is there, to your point, there's no way to escape that. Like I could get off the bus if shit was happening with somebody on the bus, and I had amnesty until the next day.
Yeah.
And if it was a Friday, well, hallelujah, because I had the weekend where I had respite.
Exactly. Yeah.
And people actually had to look your shit up in a phone book, right? Like it got delivered to your house, right? Thick as a dictionary, and you had to look up. You had to have an idea of like where they lived.
Yeah.
And then you would have to call the house. And you know why you didn't typically do that? Because the landline stood the risk of the mom or dad would answer the phone.
Yeah.
You didn't want to deal with them.
Yeah.
So, there were some built-in safety mechanisms to that. Well, now this is direct call.
Right to your pocket.
Right to your pocket. And so there's no escape. So when you're being hammered incessantly, and mind you, you turn notifications off, you kill your accounts, okay? At the high school level, friends think they're being a friend by letting you know, hey, listen, this shit was said about you. So-and-so did this. So-and-so said that about you. And while their intention is maybe merit-based, the impact is not.
Yeah.
It's not that.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think, there is now a push for the Surgeon General to put a mental health warning on social media.
And there's a class action suit that's going on right now
So interesting.
with I believe with Twitter, Instagram, and it has to do with videos that are promoting poor mental health conditions, body image disorders, right? Because sadly, and I say sadly with no like ifs, ands, or buts, it becomes a comparative society. How do I compare to that person, right? Think about like growing up as an adolescent for you, and you're on the threshold of like technology really taking foothold.
Yep.
Where do I belong? Where do I fit in? Well, holy fuck, how do you do it now?
Yeah, how do you, absolutely.
It's
a lot harder. So I wanted to ask you, we brought up, the crisis that faces not only students but also adults.
Yeah.
So what do you think needs to be done to address that crisis? I mean, you can talk as it pertains to students or adults.
I think we need to become real about the fact that mental health doesn't get the funding sources that, and just to kind of go to the other end of it, right? Like money makers like Big Farm. Okay. There's a lot of money to be made by hospitals hospitals and care facilities that can maybe utilize a certain approach for a medical condition.
Well, I've talked about this before, that
But listen, I know for a fact, looking at just the county that you and I, used to share, right? You're up here in Albany now in the capital region. I'm still in Dutchess County. Dutchess County used to have an adolescent inpatient mental health unit at the old St. Francis Hospital, now known as Mid-Hudson Regional. That did not.
They got rid of it?
For adolescents, the adolescent unit has been gone for.
You gotta be kidding.
That's been gone for 15 years or so.
Really?
And that's because it wasn't making as much money.
Looks like I gotta write another letter.
So the adult unit is still there. But the adolescent unit is not. So when you have now, Dutchess County has come up with, right, the stabilization center, right, which is a great place to go to begin to get your foot in the door with mental health supports and services. But if you end up, let's say, at the emergency room, right, for Mid-Hudson Regional, which is where you would go if you have a mental health emergency. If you're an adolescent and they think that you require inpatient hospitalization, you're looking at Katona or Saratoga region,
so far away,
or further south into Westchester County,
and that's so far away
or
from
New York
family.
City.
If any of them, if any of them have family structure.
So there's no inpatient hospitalization whatsoever. There's not one bed in Dutchess County.
That's so not right. That is not right at all.
And
it's
I can tell you the beauty of that service and what it provided, because when I was in grad school, I had the fortune of my first internship. Granted, it was an internship relegated for second-year students, but I was seen as somebody who could handle it, the responsibility, and I was fortunate to get an internship on the adolescent inpatient unit at St. Francis Hospital. That was back in 98, 99. That was 25 years ago.
Yeah. So you've kind of already touched on, if that's just a problem that can be solved in schools, or if it requires a whole community approach. I think you just answered that definitely requires a whole community, resources, and all of that, right?
But communities also got to come from funding sources from state and federal government too. And we have to, we still need work on destigmatizing mental health, mental well-being. Think, right? You didn't want people to see you as being weak. There is this notion that still exists that if I say I have, and fill in the blank, well, then I'm not as much as society wants or needs me to be. So, we need to be better at that.
Absolutely.
I think schools need to do away with smartphones being in the school. I know Governor Hochul is proposing, and I don't agree necessarily with all of her viewpoints, but I don't agree with any politician's viewpoints across the board. So like I go, that makes sense. Nope, you're an idiot. All in the same breath, talking about the same person.
Yeah.
But I like the fact that she's talking about outlawing, so to speak, smartphones in schools.
Yeah.
I mean, I walk through, you know me, and I'll walk through the hall from point A to point B. And if I see you in the hall, whether I know you or not, you make eye contact with me. I'm saying hi. I'm saying good morning. I'll try and high five you, much to your chagrin.
Yeah. You're talking to somebody whether they want to talk to you or not.
But it's harder to make that eye contact.
Yeah, when you're looking down.
They're doing this.
Yeah. I mean, it's so interesting that it's like people can't handle eye contact anymore.
No. So you mentioned the mediation, right? Like that I had you do years ago. So I just finished my the Arlington House system being what it is.
Yeah.
I just finished freshman year with kids that'll be sophomores in September. I did a mediation within the first month of the school year.
And I want to clarify before you go in, there's no names being told, so he's allowed to say this.
So I did a mediation with these two young ladies who were at odds, and they were referred to me by administration. I met with both of them individually, right, as I always do, and I say, this is what's being offered. This is how it would be. Here's what a mediation's rules are. Here are the 3 steps to the mediation. And then they have the ability to say, yeah, I'll do it. I never mandate people to do it. So both parties agreed. And then one of the first rules is you will speak to one another, not through me. That it's not, and then she, or then he, it's, and then I remember you said, right, that's speaking to, not through. They could not look at each other. And I had a brand new guidance counselor who just came to the high school from one of our middle schools. And she was sitting in to observe a mediation because one of the students was hers. And so she is in there, and one of the students, as they were looking down, went, "Why are you staring at me?" And the guidance counselor said, "Well, I'm not staring at you." She said, "I'm actually making eye contact just so you know that, like, I'm listening, and so that you know, like, that I'm speaking to you."
Wow.
And both students went, "Yeah, that's weird." Wow. So eye contact is foreign. And think about it. When we're talking this way, whether it's because we're typing or posting, or we're in a chat box with somebody, right, and we're DMing them through a social media platform, you're not making eye contact.
No, it's so easy. And you like half hear someone, you're not fully listening.
Yeah, that always reminds me of
listening and hearing are two different things.
White men can't jump. You're listening to Jimmy, but are you hearing Jimmy? Yeah. Or maybe it's you're hearing Jimmy, but are you listening to Jimmy?
Yeah. I think that's that. Yeah, the second one was.
It's Woody Harrelson trying to school Wesley Snipes.
Yeah. So we've covered a lot today. I wanted to just close it out because you are so famous for what you call your parting words. For anyone who doesn't know what parting words are, basically, Babb likes to, what's the word? Curate playlists of music that are basically what he thinks is represents you as whoever he's working with, right?
And that point in your life, right?
At that point in your life.
Yeah.
And so at this point, usually he'd do it with his seniors, right?
Yep.
And so he'd bring you in the office, starts the playlist.
Still do this, by the way.
I know. And basically just gives this, whoever he's working with, these parting words to take with them with this playlist of all these songs that he sees as representative of them in that point in their life. It's a profound experience. It's
emotive.
And it's, it was funny because as the time came closer to it, it was almost like you'd be sitting in class and you'd be waiting for that pink pass and you'd see it come and you're like, oh man, this is it. This is the parting words. And I'll never forget, on my playlist, you had Ozzy Osbourne's, Diary of a Madman album playing. There was other songs.
There was a reason for that, though.
But I loved Ozzy. I loved, all that. But
your cousin was a singer in an Ozzy tribute cover band.
Yeah.
Who I was friends with the guitarist, so that was just fun. That's a weird dynamic that was a common thread that connected us because Paul and Sandy were at my wedding. Yeah. Paul's the guitarist in SATO.
Yeah.
And you're like, oh, that's my cousin. I call him Fat Ozzy.
Yeah. He's not fat anymore.
No, I know.
Say that.
Yeah. Jamie's doing well, though.
Yeah. But, so I wanted the people watching and listening to kind of get the chance to have some parting words of their own. So what's one important message that you would want someone who's tuning in right now to walk away from this episode with?
Organically off the top of my head in this moment, thoughts and feelings are not facts, right? Like we get so swept up in different moments where we might say in a certain way, nobody likes me, or, nothing ever goes my way. Right. So we develop this notion of, right. 'Cause it's really what we're feeling is despair or fear, right? Or hurt or sadness. And then we create like this cognitive thought, right? About to try and encapsulate it. And we tend to overgeneralize, right? And it's not that nobody likes me. It feels like right now that nobody likes me. And I know that's not necessarily true. Now, I for those listening, I just emphasize the word "and" because I'm also a big believer in the following phrase, which is, and be careful, like just talk about being mindful and raising your own awareness, right? The words we use are based on how we have shaped our thought process and view of the world, okay? There are many people, I believe you were one of them at some point in your life, who was very, very closely connected to the word "but."
Oh, absolutely.
And everything after "but" is bullshit.
Say that again.
Everything after "but" is bullshit. And the example that always comes to mind, my early work in domestic violence, a man who was in that group, and I won't name him, but I learned from him, and that's the beauty of doing this stuff is when you learn from the people you're working with. And he challenged other people in the group because somebody said, in a domestic violence group for court-mandated men who were physically and or emotionally abusive to their partners and or kids.
Wow.
And they were court-mandated for 28 weeks. So once a week we did group. And a man who was new to group was disclosing why he was in group. And one of the things he said was, I know I shouldn't have had out the gun, but I needed her to know how serious I was. And then another person immediately followed it with, yeah, I can relate to that. Like, I know I shouldn't have pushed her down the stairs, but she kept pushing my buttons.
Wow.
And in that moment, this other group member goes, I just got to say something. And he was so well versed, and he had relapsed. He was in different drug courts, but he was working at it.
Yeah. Those are sometimes like the best people that, that are just trying, man.
Well,
They're
not
really
only that, but like you're going to listen, I can talk the shoes off a dead man, right?
Yeah.
Like, but the truth is, if the words of wisdom are coming from a peer, it might have more of an impact than if it was coming from me.
Yeah.
And so this guy turns around and says to the new members in the group, I just got to tell you, y'all don't own a damn thing. Y'all sit here and say, I know I shouldn't have, or I know I didn't mean to, but listen, man, everything after "but" is bullshit. And like, I always remember that. And I remember talking to him after, and I said, when I think about that statement, like how much different it is when we then, right? And this is not like a Babb original, right? But like when we substitute the word "but" with the word "and," it automatically begins to alter the next thought that's coming.
Yeah.
So, I inflect "and" because that's my way of then reminding myself to not land on the "but," right? So keep my butt out of it.
Yeah. That's profound.
Yeah. Keep my butt out of it. Keep your butt out of it.
Yeah.
I would also say that it's okay to not be okay, right? Like if we want to destigmatize this mental health, mental well-being conversation for America, like then we need to begin to say like we are all going to ride the undulating, right? For like undulating meaning like the ups and downs, the hilly slopes, the ups and downs of the emotional landscape of the human condition. That it's okay to not be okay. What I'm feeling now, what I'm thinking now, isn't necessarily facts, and it's not forever. It's like anything else. It's kind of like a cloud along the mountaintop. It's just passing. You know?
Yeah.
It's just passing.
Those are some great parting words, important messages. Thank you so much. This was awesome. Thank you so much for coming all the way up here to do this.
Listen, I owe you that much because you refuse to go away.
Yeah.
But no, listen, the work you're doing, part of my legacy, like when I retire, is that, you're taking the work and you're impacting the lives of other people.
I appreciate that.
So, that like pay it forward. That's what social work really is, right?
Absolutely.
It's really about seeing a condition and doing your best to meet it, and then teaching others then how to continue that work. So you're continuing that work. So like, why wouldn't I come up?
Absolutely. And it's awesome to be able to do this in person, instead of over Zoom. So
don't do it this way.
I see what you did there. So folks, thank you so much for tuning in. I hope you enjoyed this episode. As always, I know we were just talking about, being on your phone and stuff, so this is going to be a little bit contradictory, but
hypocritical, maybe
hypocritical. But let us know in the comments, some things that resonated with you from this episode. Leave a like and subscribe, of course, to never miss an episode. And I'll see y'all in a couple weeks. And lots of love.
And I'll just add real quick for everybody. Listen, if you find yourself in a position, whether it's because of circumstance in the moment or it's down the road, and you're feeling like you're in over your head, that's okay. What's not okay is to sit in silence. What's not okay is to think that nobody would understand.
Yeah.
And so I encourage all of you, worst case scenario, you can text 988. Okay, that's the National Suicide Hotline. If your county that you live in happens to have its own helpline, okay, like I'm from Dutchess County, so Dutchess County has its own helpline. For all those back in the 845, that's that number is 485-9700. The 988 number will route to because right now it's based on where you are geographically. It should be geo-pinged. It's not geo-pinged. It goes to your area code.
Okay.
So like if I 988'd right now from up here in the Capital District, it'll ping down to the helpline number down in Dutchess County.
Oh, okay.
They will work. You let them know where you're located, where you're calling from. They will get you to the closest set of resources in your area. So 988, it's the National Suicide Hotline. Use it, know it if you need to access it.
That's great. Thank you so much for that resource. That's awesome. I think more people need to know that.
Yeah.
So again, thank you so much for tuning in. Thank you again for being here.
Pleasure, my friend.
And I will see y'all in a couple weeks. Peace.